Hello and welcome back. Today I want to talk about another brand new QNAP. They're really pushing them out there at the moment. I want to talk about their brand new 3-bay NAS, the TS-351. Now the 351 is a media-centric NAS. We've seen this chassis used before in other QNAP NASs such as the TS-328 and the 332X. But this time, rather than looking at the one that was designed for file management or the one that was designed for 10 GBE, this is one that is designed, I think, with multimedia pretty much at the front. It features an Intel-based CPU that we'll talk about later on, and as well as the 3 hard drive bays that support up to a RAID 5 environment. On top of that, you've got 3 M2 SSD bays internally for caching and tiered storage. Now, this device for me is interesting, but a few of you may need to be a little bit more convinced to go for this bad boy. It's not conventional like a lot of QNAP NASs that you've seen, like the B series, the BE series, the 51, the 53A, and all of that train spotter stuff. This one is a contained chassis NAS. It's plastic in design, quite quiet, with LEDs there on the front for hard drives and those M2s inside. On the rear of the device, we've got an HDMI port there, we've got multiple LAN ports, we've got 2 1 GBE LAN ports there built into the rear. On top of that, we've got a microphone and audio in and out port, as well as USB 3 throughout. That said, I say throughout, that's terribly foolish, there's also USB 2 on the rear. This is for external peripherals, external storage. You can attach a UPS that can be controlled via that USB port for, activation. On top of that, you can also attach a keyboard and mice and a visual device for a surveillance solution with this device, with QVR Pro and QNAP's own surveillance station software. But it's really where this device lives. It supports 4K, and the CPU inside is an Intel. It's an Intel Celeron J1800. It's a dual-core 2.41 GHz CPU, and it can be bursted up to 2.58. So once again, a dual-core CPU. It's not that J3355 that we've been seeing knocking around. This is a slightly older revision chip, and that is reflected in the price. Next to that CPU, you've also got 4 gig of DDR3 memory that can be upgraded officially to 8 gig across 2 slots. 16 gig across 2 slots, but they're saying 8 on all the documentation. I'd go a little higher. I'm sure that CPU supports it. Now, those M2 slots are all SATA based. There isn't NVMe connectivity here with those inside slots. These are designed for normal M2 SSDs inside and keep things moving very, very fast indeed, and support the traditional storage by giving you a lot of buffering, a lot of read-write cache. And if you look at my other videos detailing M2 SSD cache, you'll see what I mean. What SSD cache is for is kind of like when you use an SSD for booting a system and a hard drive for your core storage. The SSD is used for primary operations and booting and other applications that need files regularly. In the case of a NAS with SSD cache, what happens is regularly accessed files, be it in the short or the long term, copies of them are moved to the SSD, and these further support the storage of the device. Now, with the architecture of this, it is going to put a lot of people off. The chassis seems a little dated. I'm not a big fan of this 3-bay chassis. I understand that, the hot swapping isn't something you're going to be that into at this level, and they want to keep costs low by removing those trays. But again, if you don't want a white NAS or a box frame NAS like this, you may want to move over to the BE or the B series. But this is an interesting NAS for a number of you, because from what I'm seeing of the price point here, it will be noticeably cheaper than the B and the BE series. And again, with an Intel CPU and HDMI output, that is of interest to a number of you. And remember, Plex will run on this device, and of course Plex can be utilised both over the network and the internet and via that HDMI port too with a remote control. Bang, done. It supports all the very latest applications from QNAP. I wouldn't risk too much virtualization on a dual-core Intel, but I'm sure it is possible. But it will support container station applications and of course those RAID environments. And the storage manager is very, very fluid now. So you can learn a great deal about the way you want your data to be accessed. And thanks to a lot of the advisory tools in the latest version of QTS, there's a lot going for this device as well on a software level. Apart from that, if you do want to learn more about QNAP NASs, do check out my videos on the structure of QTS 4.3.5, which is now officially available and out of beta. But this device will support all of those multimedia applications in 4K and 1080p as well. The read and writes are, as you would expect, with a 1GBE device at around 100 megs, give or take 110 in some places. And of course you can enable encryption, AES-NI, and then the performance will dip. Still above 100 megs a second, but it will dip that read and write speed. The chassis itself has got ventilation on the front, the sides, the back, and underneath. Even though it looks quite a closed environment, it is well separated, with the SSDs on one side built into the Mobo and the hard drives raised above it, not touching them in any shape or form. Once again, surveillance can support, I believe, 25 cameras on that CPU. And again, you've got 4 licenses for surveillance station included and 8 for QVR Pro. Do check it out. Otherwise, do follow the link in the description to nascomparisonspan.com to learn more about these devices. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.